The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Faster my good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line today. We're open line through till 1, so whatever's on your mind, the floor's yours. Lines are open on 66 13 68. Text 166 177. Email studio@manxradio.com. WhatsApp 166 177. Just a quick word. Police are still looking for that grey Range Rover that was stolen and this doesn't happen much on the Isle of Man, but a grey Range Rover was stolen from the Douglas area. It was seen about 6 o'clock this morning around Strang, Union Mills area, JMN 201F, Juliet Mike November 201 Foxtrot. If you see a vehicle matching that description, call 631212, or if it's an emergency, call 999. That's a grey Range Rover, JMN 201F. And let me just remind you also that because of the way the mist is at the moment, the matrix signs at Hilbury, Bagarrow and Ramsey and Sulby to the mountain showing fog on the mountain road, and I think also at Barrule Park, fog on the mountain road, so please do take care. The hospitality trade is looking for government help. So what does the government do, says Ian? Put up airport taxes and charges. I don't think this is being in touch at all. Well, the hospitality trade is looking for help, and I just wonder what your thoughts are, whether this is something, is this in government's gift to do? Plainly it is. They can if they want. Should they do this? But also, yesterday in Keys, the Chief Minister said he was bringing forward a private member amendment to propose a referendum on assisted dying. This is the Chief Minister who says, because of everything that's been said, this is a private member's bill, of course, being brought forward by the Treasury Minister, Dr. Allinson, MHK for Ramsey. And Mr. Cannon thinks now it is time for the people to have their say. I just wonder what your thoughts are on this. So, is this something that you think should happen? And if we're having a referendum on one thing, do you think we might as well make use of the one referendum? I can't think of there's ever been a referendum on the Isle of Man before. So this is, if it is, it's truly history-making. If we're going to have a referendum, why not throw a few other questions on the paper? Anyway, this is what Mr. Cannon had to say yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, it is clear to me that we are voting for much, much more than the status quo of advancement that this bill implies. It is a much deeper and wide-ranging issue. You must be prepared to accept the consequences that will come in passing this legislation. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I want to use this opportunity to confirm that I will be supporting the amendments to this legislation throughout the debates that do their best to offer greater protection to the outcome, even though I do so knowingly that it is somewhat of a fool's errand. I also want to inform the House today in advance that I will be bringing forward an amendment next week that, if supported, will mean a referendum is needed before the legislation is adopted. There comes a time and a place when the people need their say.
Yeah.
In the interim, I will be supporting the amendments today put forward by Mr. Talls.
Well, did you hear what the Chief Minister said? Fool's errand? We got to think about the consequences, what outcome is going to happen to protect the outcome. The Chief Minister proposing that he'll bring forward a referendum on the Isle of Man, a single issue vote, so that you have a say in whether or not this legislation goes forward. This is a subject that divides opinion. We've talked about it many, many times on the Isle of Man. There have been impassioned pleas. There's been a debate. We've had experts on from the UK talking about it. Many people have talked on this. And if you have something you want to contribute to this, then by all means do get in touch. Text, email, call and WhatsApp. The Keys members spent a good deal of time yesterday discussing end-of-life care and how it should come about and ending someone's life. It was the clauses stage of assisted dying private members bill of Dr. Allinson yesterday. 313G says, surely if we can find the money for the referendum, then we can extend it to cover a vote on climate change policy as well. If we're having a referendum, we don't have them that often. I can't think of it. If anybody can think of them, we haven't had a referendum, a single issue vote. Then please get in touch. The last referendum on the Isle of Man was held in the parish of Onchan, which voted in favour to join the village of Onchan. I think that was the mid-1980s. 511. Thank you. Rob Callister, MHK, is that? So in the parish of Onchan to join the village of Onchan. This would be a nationwide referendum. I appreciate that, Rob. Thanks for that information. But the last time we actually had a nationwide referendum on this, yesterday there were some expert witnesses who gave testimony yesterday. One was a barrister, Charles Foster, who was giving the legal view. You can hear what Mr. Foster has to say. He was asked about the fact that, well, other jurisdictions, other locations around the globe have introduced assisted dying. This is Charles Foster.
I haven't done it very satisfactorily. We've seen in all the jurisdictions that have assisted dying regimes slippery slopes, and those slippery slopes have led to people who feel that they are a burden, seeking assisted dying, people who want therefore to stay alive, seeking assisted dying but feeling that they have a duty not to. We've seen the reporting requirements which are designed to ensure that the regimes work in the way that they should work, simply not functioning. So we've really no reason to think that there are workable regimes, assisted dying regimes.
The BMA did a big piece of work on the doctor-patient relationship, and I was also part of that piece of work.
That's one of the doctors who was giving evidence yesterday. Her name is Dr. Jackie Davis, who was talking about, well, you'll hear her side.
And they consulted doctors and patients, and the vast majority of patients think that assisted dying legislation would improve the doctor-patient relationship. There was no talk about being fearful about your doctor. It was, we can have better conversations at the end of life if this legislation is in place. So it's not right that the evidence is that the doctor-patient relationship is not in any way compromised, and in fact it improves if assisted dying legislation is introduced. And I can tell you, I have seen patients in situations that I would not want my family to be in, I would not want to be in myself, and that is despite the use of the best possible palliative care. Assisted dying should be part of that spectrum, and of course, palliative care should and does improve in jurisdictions where assisted dying is introduced. There'll never be, no need for palliative care, and it will get better and better. But there's still that small residue of patients who will die in pain, who will die in suffering. And I bet everybody in this room knows somebody that has happened to. One bad death is one bad death too many when we can prevent it, because that's suffering. And if you have legislation, no more people will die, but fewer people will suffer. And I put it to you, that is the most compassionate way to look at this.
Well, there we are. That's Dr. Jackie Davis talking about this. And remember, this is the Chief Minister saying this. Chief Minister has been in Parliament since, 2011. He's experienced. He is our Chief Minister, and he's saying now an amendment to propose a referendum. Doesn't mean we're having one, but a proposal for a referendum. Here's Frank now. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Andy. How are you, son? All right.
Good, yeah. What's on your mind, Frank?
Right, about this assisted dying. I agree with it. I think I'm in a situation where this is happening to me in one way. I'm in excruciating pain 24/7. There's nothing the medical people can do for me. I can't have surgery because I wouldn't survive. So what do? Do I suffer the rest of my life in excruciating pain? The only time I don't feel it is when I'm unconscious, when I'm asleep. And then it wakes me up. So what do? Can anybody answer that question?
What's the advice from your doctor?
They can't do anything. That's it. There's nothing they can do.
How much medication are you on, Frank?
I take a lot. I take opium, which is an unbelievable amount that would kill a normal person. I've been told that so many times. But, it doesn't it doesn't stop the pain. It deadens it a little bit, but not much. So I want to know what is the answer? Do you then suffer for the rest of your life in hell? I know that, all right, it means that I could not suffer if I was sat down for a long time. That would hurt, but sit down for a while and it eases a little bit. So I don't know what to do. I don't know what the answer is, but I do believe in what they're trying to do for people maybe that are in 10 times worse situation than I am.
But Frank, it's such a step to take.
Yeah, but then if you're in so much pain, I'm not talking about a little bit of pain, I'm talking about excessive pain. That's not life, it's existing. And it's not good. So what do? I fight, I try, I go out, I try to fight it all the time. I do my art, as you know I do. And that sort of helps me a little bit, but don't stop the pain. It never goes away, and that's what I'm trying to cure, if you like, and I can't.
Okay.
I've even flown to Ireland to try and have things done privately. But, they tell me they can't do certain things. You can only do a little bit. And I'm going back to Ireland again to have more treatment. I just hope to God it works. Because if it doesn't, I don't know if I can take it all my life. I don't know how long I'm going to live. I'm 88 now, so I don't know how long I'll go.
Okay.
I feel all right in the top half of my body. It's fine. I feel like 30, 40. I'm fine. But it's the rest of me that's no good.
Frank, we wish you well. Thanks for calling today.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Good to hear from you. Is Julian with us now? Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. Yeah, just listening to Frank. It's a difficult one, this, but I'd like to draw people's attention to a TV program that's coming up. So if you want to write it down, put it in your diary, it's going to be on BBC One next Tuesday, the 14th of May, at 9 o'clock in the evening. And it's called Better Off Dead? By Liz Carr with 2 R's. Liz became wheelchair-bound at the age of 7 after being diagnosed with arthrogryposis multiplex congenita, which is a congenital contraction of the joint that causes her a lot of pain since she was 7 from muscle fibrosis. She's an actress and journalist and has starred in many films and TV shows, including The Witcher, Silent Witness, and, of course, her upcoming documentary, Better Off Dead. Her documentary, she went to Canada, and she is afraid after being there that the UK-assisted suicide legislation could result in the disabled, the mentally ill, even the poor, including people who've fallen on hard times, especially following the COVID lockdowns, destruction of businesses and the current economic climate, being enrolled or even feeling compelled to enroll in it. Liz believes that the recent change in the description to assisted dying is merely to make it sound better and nicer, less shocking than euthanasia and suicide, which is less pleasant to hear. And similarly, Liz says the use of the words dignity in dying, which replaced, after 71 years in 2006, the Voluntary Euthanasia Society, which was set up in 1935, is seen as a more comfortable name for that organisation. Palliative care specialist Dr. Catherine Sleeman in Canada says she is seeing more patients who say, I don't want to go to a care home really, but I know my family want me to have an assisted death and I know it will be easier for them, so I think I will say yes. So now she's seeing the word go to a care home are being substituted with have an assisted death. She also says that if it's about choice and autonomy, why isn't everyone being offered it? In Canada, the disabled and the poor are being offered assisted suicide with the reason that money and resources aren't available. For example, Paralympian Christine Gauthier, who requested a wheelchair lift for a property over 5 years, but instead was offered assisted suicide, or someone who has become homeless. So they are described as having made a choice. But is it a choice if political decisions are making conditions unbearable for people and the only way out is assisted suicide?
So Julia, I mean, what's your opinion? You've mentioned many times the situation in Canada, and Canada is always thought of as being a very liberal, democratic, warm and friendly. Canadians are some of the most polite people I've ever met in my life. But you paint a rather dark picture of what's happening in Canada.
Well, would you say we're democratic here?
Well, we have elections, don't we?
Yeah, but we had an informed referendum, namely the consultation last year, which came up with a majority saying that we didn't want to go ahead with assisted suicide. So if we go for a new referendum, as much as I can see the Chief Minister's reasoning for it, it's a much blunter tool just to say yes or no when we've had a consultation. I mean, how many questions were in there? There was 35 or so. I can't remember how many there were. There were loads. So it was quite a fine tool that people could look at and answer those questions. But you see, I voted against it in that consultation, and I feel my vote has been ignored because they're basically, straight after it, they've gone to push the bill forward. So what was the point in what was effectively an informed consultation?
So just tell me this again. This is what, the BBC One next Tuesday 14th. What time again was it?
9 o'clock in the evening.
9 o'clock.
Also, yesterday, she did a podcast. So it's like listening on the radio on your computer. And if you look for Liz Carr with 2 R's, BBC Sounds, you'll find it's one of the latest interviews that she had. She was actually asked in the interview that you can hear on the BBC website yesterday, what would convince her to go for assisted suicide legislation? And she said, can you guarantee no mistakes, no abuse, no coercion, choosing it because of being made to feel a burden, not getting the right medical treatment, lack of social care, lack of housing, feelings of no future? In the current socio-economic climate, is it safe or responsible to be bringing in assisted suicide? Is it a good idea legalizing something that leapfrogs certain issues rather than dealing with them? It's not just about choice at end of life, but a full choice during life.
Okay, all right. Julian, we appreciate that. Thanks for calling today.
Thanks, Andy. Cheers.
Good to hear from you. How about putting the legalisation of cannabis for personal use on the referendum? If there is to be a referendum, and I don't want to trivialise it, but if we're going to the cost of having a referendum, do you think there are other things we should put on? Should it be personal use of cannabis? I got a message in, somebody said, why don't we also put our sustainable policies on there that weren't really mentioned at the last election? And what about the vote for the bishop? Let's put that on there. We hear time and again these arguments, as text to 917, that assisted dying is a slippery slope. If this is the case, why can't they give one single example of what happened at the bottom of this slope? It's just, I think, a desperate fairy tale to stop people having the right to choose their own fate with some dignity when the end comes. I'd hate to be put in that situation, says Tony, for social and economic reasons. We live in a Christian nation, so we should come together like Christians then. Many thanks, Tony, on 476. And your listeners also should listen to a podcast called Everything Went Fine, assisted dying carried out in Switzerland from the daughter's perspective on her father, says John. And Ian says, I've got no problem with the Chief Minister seeking the views of the people. Personally, I support assisted dying. It does beg the question, if the Chief Minister feels he needs the public view on this, what other serious matters that the Manx public having to deal with do our elected members feel they need our view on? Because, let's be frank, we're all facing big issues on the Isle of Man. The government seems incapable of dealing satisfactorily with, as says Ian. We we elect our representatives to make decisions. Is this them abrogating that responsibility? What do you think about this? Peter's with us now. Hello, Peter.
Oh, hello, it's Peter Murgott here. Yes, Julian's made a number of the points that I would make. The first thing is that we've, as Julian has so eloquently said, we've already had in effect a referendum by the public consultation, and it was better than a referendum because a referendum will depend, of course, on the question that you put, and they're very difficult to frame. Secondly, you don't have the same amount of information as we had in the public consultation, so you could call the public consultation an informed referendum because anybody could have responded, and we have to remember that the majority were against the assisted dying bill. Now, it's not enough, as some have done, to say, oh yes, but it was just a slim majority. We might remember that back in 1979, those who can go back that far, that there was a vote of confidence in Parliament in Britain about James Callaghan's government, and he lost the vote of confidence by one vote. I think it was something like 310 to 311, something like that. And one vote brought a government down. So the referendum in effect has already been held. They lost it, and yet they introduced the bill. And so we have to ask ourselves, if we have another referendum, if it goes in the same way, what effect is it going to have on the bill? And the precedents are not encouraging. And so I can't see that it would do any good. I think it would be difficult, and it certainly wouldn't be informed as the consultation was. Second thing, I'd just like to mention, because somebody did ring in after I'd spoken last time and seemed to wonder whether I got all my facts right. That was the impression I got. I went down to the Tynwald office, to the Tynwald Library. I checked out all my facts before ringing in, as I do, because I don't ring in if I haven't checked every single thing out. And what happened was, if I can repeat it again, that there hasn't been time even to get this bill properly amended because they had a consultation on it by way of, well, they didn't consult with the public, to my knowledge. They had this select committee. It produced a voluminous report of about 234 pages. That was presented to the Keys in April the 23rd. By April the 29th, lo and behold, all the amendments had got to be in. I take it that there can't be any more, and in actual fact, there are several places where amendments are urgently needed, and I'm not sure of the mechanism whereby they can be introduced. And so I'm afraid the precedents are not encouraging, really, that this whole thing seems to be going on at an awful pace, which is guaranteed to produce, wherever you're coming from on this, it's going to produce some very bad law, and it'll be very difficult to do anything about it. So I think those are the key points, really. And in any event, we're coming up to May the 17th shortly, the first anniversary of the suicide prevention strategy. You can't have provision and prevention. The House of Keys or Tynwald have got to decide which one they want. They can't do both. They can't spend money in two contradictory ways, but that's what's being proposed, really. And so I think the bottom line is that the whole thing is in an absolute mess. And the sooner that they ditch this bill, the better.
OK, thanks, Peter. Good to hear from you. Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.
It's 29 minutes before 1. Sad listening to Frank. I think there are many natural approaches that can help chronic long-term pain that aren't always known or flagged by medical doctors. It'd be awful if, due to lack of knowledge or alternative therapy, solutions, options, people feel a lack of traditional medicine means the only option is death. The referendum, says texter 800, 2 suggestions: government reform, run the government without silos, one government without silos, one government with a collaborative, consultative umbrella partnership steering group involving system partners from the third sector, corporate, and a tool that invites members of the public and experts to provide guidance on areas of expertise. Thanks for that. And again, many people just saying that. Sad to hear what Frank says. It's fatuous, really, to say that you sympathise with somebody who has chronic long-term pain. Most people listening now have no idea what chronic long-term pain is. Think of the worst pain that you've ever suffered, perhaps the worst dental pain, and then multiply that day by day by day. And you get an idea of what it's like. Nobody, apart from the person who's suffering from long-term pain, can know what that's like. Palliative care is already assisted dying. Sometimes medication or intravenous fluids or meds are allowed not to be offered. Essentially, you're helped to die, says Margaret in Ramsey. I thought the government said 2/3 of the island wanted euthanasia, that this texter calls it 068, legalised. It is wanted by far too many to ignore. The opponents are trying to take our choice away. No amount of pain relief will help some things. The referendum is trying to stall the bill going through. And Howard's with us now. Hi, Howard.
Hello, Andy. Just a sheer coincidence. I've been on about the trees down in Portashee. I know it seems to be a different subject. They were put there in 1935. The following year, King George V was dead. And I was reading about it the other night, and it turned out that King George V, his death, an act alternately referred to as euthanasia, because his physician, Lord Bertrand Dawson, he actually injected the king with morphine and cocaine. And this was at the request of the king's family, etc., that the king did not suffer in death. And that was in 1936. So those trees do have a significance here on the island, but also I thought it crossed my mind. Here we are with another physician now here on the island pushing the assisted dying bill. Alex Allenson.
Yeah.
So the physician that actually injected King George V to put him, take him from this life into the next, was a physician. And here we have another physician pushing again, 90 years later, still trying to get a similar sort of legalization for it.
You can answer this or not, Howard, but how would you answer the question?
That I think is down to a personal thing, and as you just said a few minutes ago, not knowing, I'm living a fairly good life at the present moment, but you don't know what's for the future. My mother had a brain hemorrhage many years ago, and she would not have wanted to carry on in a vegetative state. That I know. She died in hospital, but she would not have wanted to be just kept alive by machines, etc.
Okay, all right. We appreciate that, Howard. Thanks for calling.
But it's a strange coincidence that about those trees. And by the way, I had a call back from Claire Barber, but there's absolutely nothing they can do about it. It's now down to the goodness of the Drinkwater estate, whether they're going to preserve those trees in their present form or they're not.
I'll think about that when I drive by them today.
Okay.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks, Andy. Bye
All
now.
right. I agree with Julian, says 800 again. I went for a consultation session for the nursing, residential and home care funding. It was sad to hear a lot of older people introduce assisted dying into the conversation, saying they would just opt for that rather than be a burden to their families. These are the words of 800. Or drain their savings. They would want to pass on their savings, their legacy, their estate to their children. There's such a risk of the wrong motivations driving an extreme, irreversible decision. Agree that until we can guarantee no mistakes, it is a slippery slope. I would also introduce one other thing. Nobody has any idea how many people would take this option. It may end up that we go through all this. It may end up that the legislation is introduced and passed and ratified and given royal assent, and nobody uses it. What would happen if we gave a parliamentary act, a parliamentary bill, and nobody used it? We don't know. It could be that 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 people may use this per year. It could be that nobody does. Manx Bob on 488, if having a referendum, I agree, to make it worthwhile, multiple questions on the referendum, we should get our money's worth. Nobody quite knows how much it would cost, this mini general election really, with just one candidate and two options. Assisted dying, we should put the fluoridation of the island's water supply, as that's going to be back on the table soon as well.
Mannin Line.
Hello, I'd like to rent a car for 3 days. Just something reasonable.
No problem at all. We've just a few rules. You can't go off island, you can't smile in the car, you can't take any friends. Oh, and it's £10,000 a day.
Renting a car doesn't need to be difficult or expensive. With prices from just £50 per day, and now collection and drop-off at the airport and Douglas. Speak to Rex Rental Company or book online at rexrental.im.
Rex Rentals. I'm so glad to hear that.
Here at Q-Plus, we're not just blue, we're green. From smart boilers to heat pumps, Q-Plus supply products from the leading brands in renewable energy for a cleaner, greener home. So call into Q-Plus on Snugborough Trading Estate, the island's largest independent plumbing and heating merchants for trade and retail. Or call 673 131 to talk to our friendly experts about the latest cost-effective products in home heating and find out what we can do for you at Q-Plus.
Spring, a time for new beginnings and nature. This season, why not have a fresh start by switching your savings to Guernsey's Bank Skipton International and watch them grow? Skipton International offers a range of savings accounts, from fixed term to notice and easy access, enabling your savings to bloom for longer. So make this spring one to remember by switching to Skipton International today.
For details of all Skipton International savings products, call 01481 730 730 or visit skiptoninternational.com. Skipton International is licensed to take deposits by the GFSC and is a participant in the Guernsey Banking Deposit Compensation Scheme. See dcs.gg.
as Gaelic Mera.
Avashanvish. A Gaelic, the Manx Gaelic, Chinian Mera, the mother tongue of Elian Vannin, the Isle of Man. Avashanvish. You can catch up with more of Manx Radio's Manx language programmes in the weekly podcast Abershenrish. Say that again. Abershenrish. Shene, that's the one.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
What's going to be the ground rules, says Andy? If we're going to have a referendum, the ground rules, will it be advisable? Will it require Tynwald to adhere to the outcome? How many of the population need to vote? How many percentage will be required? Will it be 75% of the 100% eligible to vote? How many? Chief Minister needs to let us know what his intentions are. Lots of parameters, Andy. Thank you for that important point. If only a few people vote, then quite what do we do? And also, thanks also to Mr. Cannon's proposed referendum on assisted dying is the best way to get the feelings of the people, says Terry, because I know many people who want this available to people with mental health problems and physical disabilities. Who are they, Terry? The government won't want to be seen to discriminate, so they'll be pushed into opening this more widely. Look at the horrors this has caused in Canada. This all came from royal assent, so it'll happen if it happens here. Thank you, Terry. I think they've talked about making it very specific and only available for very specific cases. However, as you point out, we have equality legislation, and if somebody isn't covered by this act and can't avail themselves of it and feel themselves being discriminated, they could take it to court. That would be unseemly in the least, wouldn't it? Simon says, Simon 705, assisted dying's for the terminally ill and terminally ill only. It's pretty simple to write that into legislation. I think people are scaremongering on this subject, so use your common sense, says Simon. Kevin says, if we're having a referendum then, as well as assisted dying, put the gas exploration, wind farms, net zero, everything on there as well. The fluoridation of the water, social use of cannabis. Right, and I hope the assisted dying legislation goes through. More doctors decide on one's fate and not just one GP, says Texter 235. And oh, by the way, today it's Wednesday and it's our 60th anniversary year. You know, every Wednesday we're rerunning from the archive Kelly's Eye. Peter Kelly and the late David Callister used to go up and down looking at buildings. Today we're looking into the history of the Victoria Arcade, which is on Market Street in Douglas. The programme was broadcast 20 years ago. Very interesting. The Victoria Arcade on Market Street in Douglas. Thanks also to lots of messages to get through, including regarding assisted dying. I think it'll be abused by a lot of people. It's a WhatsApp of 232. It'll be abused by a lot of people. The safeguarding measures will have to be huge and complex. It's not that people aren't in pain, serious illnesses, etc. I do empathise with them, but you have to look at it objectively and what the overall outcome will be. While I think people should have the autonomy to end their life without reason, it doesn't mean that they have the right to conscript the government to carry it out. The government to carry it out. There are other ways. Lastly, remember that a doctor can refer you to medicinal cannabis. It works very well for many people in pain. And still, just regarding that correspondent 232 saying, who's going to do this? They've still not said, will this be Manx Care or will there be somebody contracted in to do this? It could be the people who run, I don't know, the Dignitas clinic in Basel in Switzerland. Who will do this? With more kind of granular detail, we'll be able to see what this may be part of our lives in the future. In the future, you may go around the world, and in addition to being famous for cats with no tails and the most famous road race in the world, it could be that people say, oh, you're from the Isle of Man. Yes, you have assisted dying, don't you? Juan's on now. Hi, Juan.
Oh, my God, and if government were in charge of assisted dying, they'd all be knocking at my door to help me, wouldn't they? I'd be the first on the list. And, you know, I read a lot of the threads that go online, and Peter Murcott, who's a very astute person, I mean, they criticise Peter for being, Christian views and stuck in the past and church views and all that. But I believe Peter he's an advocate as well, isn't he? He's in the legal profession, or was in the legal profession.
He was a lecturer, I think, as well.
Yeah. So quite an astute person. When he talks, that comes over quite well. I concern about the referendum that Alpha's put forward, and my concern would be taken back to listening to the students of Castle Rushen last week, who you had on, and their total lack of knowledge in politics and really no interest in politics. And we're going out to the electorate and to the voters, of which these people were probably just in the voting range. So if you're going to go down this path, then I would say that you really need to have a very well-balanced, educated, open forum for people to listen to this, to be able to come to it, to be able to Zoom call into it and listen to it online if they can't get to it, to get a totally 100% balanced view. I was talking to a person last night, and they were saying about assisted dying. If it happened to me and I got that poorly, then I would want that. And I explained the both sides to them, and it gave them a totally different view on it, which they'd never looked at before. Bonzo mentioned the other day about the island being a test bed. I quite agree. I think I don't agree a lot with what Bonzo says, but I think, we are being maybe used as a test bed for what's coming in.
Well, Jersey, I think, in the early stages of legislation. So do you think that the UK, I mean, isn't it Esther Ranson, who's not very well at all, I think, that is pushing for this in the UK. So you think the UK is watching to see what the Crown dependencies do?
Oh, absolutely. And here's a reality check as well. Doctors have got an oath to save life. We've already had doctors who have said that they will not stay here if this goes ahead. So there's people in the profession of saving lives who don't agree with this. And just a reminder for people, there's people waiting 3 weeks for a phone appointment for doctors at the moment. How is that going to end up if we start losing doctors? That's a reality check of this, is do we actually need this put in place? And I totally agree with the people who say, like Frank before, that they're in that much pain and that there's no way back. I've watched people in their end of life in hospice, and it's sad, and there's something that needs to be done, but to bring this in an ideal world, it would be great, but we are not in an ideal world. We're not on a fair playing field. I'll refer to something that was put on the web on the politics page last night from a person who is in a leader of a politics group over here, and was asked about different varying ailments of people, and would they be included? And he says, yes, totally, they should be. And then the question was asked, I'm reading from the photo shots that I've got, the question was asked, Down syndrome, ? And this person said, symptoms vary widely, but if someone with Downs finds their quality of life intolerable, again, it's their choice. So, again, where does this stop? That's the danger. Where's the end to this? Where does it stop? And I think that what Julian gets at with Canada and the Netherlands is, we've said this before, primary legislation goes through, secondary legislation slips through very quickly, and governments afterwards can change laws. And I think that's the problem is, are we cheapening life by bringing in this stuff? There is ways where people can end life as it is at the moment, but are we cheapening life by doing this? We're slowly taking away the Christian values out of everything at the moment. And again, referring to the elections last week, we only have to look at that to see where this is ending up.
So what do you say? I don't know whether you remember last time we had a couple of experts on last year talking about this, one pro, one against. And there was the case of the lady from the south of the Isle of Man whose husband was in intolerable pain, her words were, his body was withering away and he himself wanted to die. So what do we say to people like that? How can you reassure somebody who who's got the opinion that they simply want to die because they're in intolerable pain and their life to them is not worth living?
You know what, Andy? I mean, it's $1 million question, and I refer back to in an ideal world, the legislation would work, but we are not in an ideal world. Very much not in an ideal world at the moment, and I think that's the concerns of a lot of people on the anti side of this, of where this could possibly lead to. Once the Pandora's box is opened, you might not be able to close it again. So there's a lot of things happening at the moment which is altering or trying to change our way of life and way of thinking and cheapening life. I don't know, Andy. It is a difficult one. I just think if we're going to have a referendum, the people need to be fully aware of what's happening and the consequences on both sides of it, and not just thrown out there, because I know there's people I talk to. Once you talk to them rationally, they have an open view on it again, and I think people need to be very well educated on this before throwing it out there to the people.
Okay, all right. Appreciate that.
Cheers, Andy. Just one more thing before I go.
Okay.
Daily Mail, I think it was yesterday, day before, AstraZeneca removing the COVID vaccine after side effects.
Apparently, well, they say there's not much demand now.
Not much demand, yeah. Well, that's not quite the one that I read, but, I think the difference between the truth and my conspiracy theories down to about 6 months at the moment. Tinfoil hats available from Deals.
Thank you for that. Good to hear from you. The consultation that Julian and Peter referred to only had 3,000 responses. The results were 49.61% disagreed with the principle of assisted dying, 49.01% agreed with it. So not representative of the whole Isle of Man view, and a difference of literally a few votes. The Manx radio poll showed a bigger number in favour. Julian and Peter, I think, are trying to pretend the Isle of Man is against it, says Steve. Steve says it's more misinformation. Thank you, Steve. Let's call it their opinion, shall we?
Tune in and chill out with Chris Pearson on Manx Radio.
Make the most of those long, light evenings with the Manx Radio Chill Out Show, Sunday nights from 7. Whether you're relaxing at home, out and about, or rounding off your work end, you'll be more than welcome. Check out the tunes and email chill@manxradio.com.
The Sunday Chill Out. Chris Pearson, Manx Radio. The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Just a quick word as well. This is what one of the other witnesses yesterday had to say. We've heard from Charles Foster, the barrister, and Dr. Jackie Davis, but this is Professor Sam Ahmed Zaire who was talking about assisted dying. He was giving evidence yesterday to Keys in the Clauser stage.
I got to the level of being Professor of Palliative Medicine for 20 years at the University of Sheffield, so I do know a bit about the subject matter. I was the first palliative medicine doctor to go public on my position about assisted dying. I published a letter to say that I'd changed my view of being against changing the law to now in favour of changing the law. And when we hear about surveys of the majority of doctors in palliative medicine are against changing the law, actually we don't know that because people are not being allowed to speak openly. So I've come clean. Even now, the other doctors don't wish to because their positions that they're in will preclude them. As a physician, I've worked in the front line for over 30 years. I'm now retired from clinical practice, so I still do my academic research and teaching, and I'm involved in production of guidelines and reports even for Parliament, which I'll mention in a minute. As a physician working in the front line of palliative and end-of-life care, I know the amount of suffering that happens in end-of-life for all conditions, not just cancer, but many other conditions. And I know how powerful we have now become in terms of alleviating a lot of that suffering. But I also know the limitations. I know that we cannot, and I say this to you absolutely, we cannot relieve all suffering.
And how much would a referendum cost, says Texter 592. How many people are really bothered? We've just jailed a chap for 90 days for not paying a fine. He's going to be deported afterwards. Total cost to the taxpayer, I say £15,000. What's the point? When will the government take charge of the costs to the public purse? Now, remember, when Mannin Line's not on the air, the answer phone is always on, 682 631. So if you'd like to call but you don't get the opportunity, then call 682 631 and by all means leave a comment there. You can also email out of hours, manninline@manxradio.com. manninline@manxradio.com. Tomorrow, as a precursor to Mental Health Awareness Week, which is next Monday, it starts on Monday, going to be live at the George Hotel in Castletown with a panel of guests talking about our mental health. And certainly, mental health and the relationship it has to suicide will come up. So I'd appreciate it if you tuned in tomorrow, high noon, live from Castletown. In the meantime, thanks for being with me today. Thanks to Ben Hartley on the phones. Here's Kelly's Eye now.
WINT. 60 years serving you as the nation's station. This is Manx Radio.
Kelly's Eye, brought to you by Ellis Brown Architects.
Peter, what's Kelly's Eye looking at today?
Today, David, knickers.
And the same to you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, Hair Design Studio. Where are you getting the knickers?
That shop that says top drawer. And look at all those illustrations, knickers, bras, and other bits that we don't know about.
Oh, my eyes wouldn't be drawn to those.
Oh, winter drawers on, you know. Well, we're here in what is now called Market Street. It hasn't always been Market Street, or this bit hasn't. This was Wellington Square at one time, which was a bit of a strange name for a road that was straight. This, in fact, was one of the old warehouses that faced on to Wellington Square. It was, in fact, in stone and whitewashed and whitewashed and whitewashed, so it was never rendered. And this linked on to a yard and a bit of a shop on the other side facing Castle Street, which at one time I think was Mr. Corlett's, the painters. And in the 70s, just moving into the 80s, it became the Victoria Arcade. It was rebuilt, and it had a plastic domed roof coming through the middle, and an ice cream parlour and a hairdressing up on top. And then you went through a series of stalls, in reality, ending up at the back here with this top drawer ladies unmentionables shop. You had a separate entrance going up so you could get to the cafe. You could also get to the hairdressers from the rear. So obviously something needed to be done with this. The planning officer said, you must pull it down and you must put your arches and whatever. Yeah. And the argument was, well, why must we do that? The building's there. You can't actually tell us that you've got to pull it down. So they conceded, and one day, of course, this will disappear, and no doubt it'll become another of these brown brick buildings. The interesting thing is that all the others were set back, so the line of the arches would in fact have taken a slice off this shop had it have been done. But the next one, where F.K. Smith's used to be, which was demolished and rebuilt, you notice actually comes out another 4 feet. Yeah. So the master plan really is not quite as master as it should be.
Many of the most iconic buildings around the island have been designed by Ellis Brown Architects. Keep up with Ellis Brown today on Facebook or via ellisbrown.in.
Part of island life for 60 years. This is your Manx Radio.